All right, everyone, this is going to be a little demonstration of how to properly use watercolor. I'm going to talk about my setup first. Notice that I have some paper on my table that is protecting the surface that I'm working on. So wherever you're working, you want to make sure you have something underneath the main paper that you're going to be painting on. I've got this piece of mixed media paper, but you're welcome to use some watercolor paper if you want. You can also work in your drawing sketchbook. Just know that it's not the best paper to use for watercolor, and your paper probably is going to buckle a little bit, okay? I've got myself a cup of water with a clean brush here. I have my watercolors. I also have a little sponge. I don't know if you have any sponges at home, but if you do that you can use, a little piece of sponge is really helpful. I'm going to show you how to use that in a minute. If you don't have a sponge, you can just use a paper towel, okay? It'll absorb a little bit more water than might be needed, but you can still work with it. It's totally fine. I've also got a pencil so I can make some notes. It's very important that you make notes as you are practicing and exploring, so you know what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like, how you achieved colors, how you didn't achieve colors, etc. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, I really like to have my students learn how to use watercolor properly and then how to apply it properly, starting with how to not do it correctly so you can get a feel of what it's like to do it correctly, all right? But the first thing you want to know about watercolor is that you're going to be using, when you do your final assignments, you're going to be using very little color and a lot more water, okay? One of the things you don't want to do is dig your brush down into the watercolor. You never want to swirl it around like this, okay? You don't want to do that, all right? You're basically just going to do something called dipping and maybe flipping, or maybe just kind of dabbing at an angle, okay? But never just swirl it around like this. It's not poster paint. It's not acrylic paint. It's not oil paint, all right? It's very delicate. You want to think of watercolor as something very delicate, okay? All right, so to get your watercolors ready, you're going to load your brush. That means you're going to get it completely full of water to where it's dripping, and you're going to let some of those drips of water into a color of your choice. You can do them all if you think you're going to be using all the watercolors. I've just got a couple right here. I'm actually just going to be using one color, but I wanted to just kind of show you what that was like. All right, now what we are going to do is we are going to try 3 different transparencies of color, okay? So we're going to be doing an 80% opacity, and if you remember from the slides, opacity means that it's kind of muddy and chalky and it's not very transparent. Then we're going to do 50% opacity, and then we are going to do 30% opacity. So that 30% opacity is going to be very transparent. The color is going to be very light. So we're basically going from dark, medium to light. All right? Okay, let's get started. Now, I've got a lot of water here in my puddle, in my pail already. So I'm going to take some of the water off my brush by using either my paper towel if you don't have a sponge, or my sponge. So I'm just going to really kind of get that water off of there. I don't want I don't want my brush completely dry, but I do want it just kind of damp, okay? So it's not really getting any water on me, so that's what I want. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna get a little color on my brush, and I'm going to apply it now. Okay, see how dark that is? That's about 80% opacity. It is more opaque than it is transparent, all right? So that is actually what I want you to practice first. And then you're going to write up here 80% opacity. Okay? So if I know that it's 80% opacity, how transparent is it? Well, it's probably going to be 20% transparent because it is more opaque than transparent. Okay? Now we're going to aim for about 50% opacity. So I clean my brush off, I get it loaded, and I'm going to take some water off, but not as much, okay? I'm going to leave a little bit more water on my brush this time. I'm going to come in here now, and I'm going to apply it. Just kind of going back and forth a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. It's definitely lighter, but it's still not as light as 30% opacity, all right? So I'm gonna put 50% opacity. So that means it is 50% transparent, okay? And on my last example, I'm gonna aim for something even lighter. I'm looking for about a 30% opacity now, okay? I clean my brush, get it loaded. This time, I'm not gonna take off as much water. In fact, I'm just gonna dab it just a tiny bit, dab my brush in here, and I'm going to apply it. I like to go over it a couple of times just to make sure I'm achieving the right opacity. There we go. And this is lighter than this one. This is about 30%. 30% opacity, 70%, okay? 70% transparent. There we go. So when we do the following assignment that we're going to be doing after this, we're going to be working with 30% opacity, okay? There are definitely times when you want 80%, definitely times when you want 50%. But because watercolor is so tricky, since we're beginning and we're learning, we're going to be starting with the 30%. So this is your first daily grade. I want you to practice this on some paper. You're going to take a photograph, upload it to your digital sketchbook, and before the due date, you're going to submit it to me so I can check and see how you're doing. Email me if you have any questions. You may record your process and ask me questions and put them on the discussion page. And of course, we will talk about these when we are in class next time. I hope this was informative, and yeah, good luck. Get going. Have fun.